Welcome to This Is a Thing, the podcast where I interview entrepreneurs who started unusual businesses and found success on their own terms. Today we're talking to Leah Koch, co-founder of the Ripped Bodice, a romance bookstore. When Leah started the business with her co-founder and sister Bea, they were the only romance bookstore in North America. They had a lot of naysayers telling them that romance was too niche of a genre and they would never survive. But it turned out those people were very, very wrong. More romance novels are sold than any other fiction genre, well over $1.4 billion in sales annually in the US alone. And focusing on that niche is what made Leah and Bea stand out and thrive. This is such a fun story of knowing your community, serving them well, and tuning out the skeptics. You run the Ripped Bodice, a romance bookstore. For those who are not romance fans who are listening, they are thinking, well, this sounds niche. This sounds like a hobby thing. Set them straight. How big is this industry?
Romance is the best-selling genre in America. There's a saying in publishing that romance keeps the lights on for all the other genres. At times, it is the only profitable part of a publishing company. We're talking about excess of $1 billion in sales annually, thousands and thousands of books coming out a year. I think it is certainly a lot more mainstream than it used to be. But yes, we run a genre bookstore. We run a niche bookstore. That is what we do.
Well, let's talk about how you got there. So I want to back up to this founding story. You had just graduated USC, right? You're in the car with your sister Bea, and you have this idea to start this business. Yeah. Did this come out of nowhere? Was this an idea that was germinating for both of you for a while?
Honestly, at the time, it kind of did feel like it came out of nowhere. I think it's built on themes from our childhood and things that we liked. Our parents were very into reading and books in general, and it was very important to them that we were readers, and we would go to bookstores a lot on vacations and trips. It never occurred to me that that was something I could do. I guess I knew in theory that somebody owned the bookstore, but it hadn't really sunk in. And it did feel a little out of the blue, but it was so immediately, this is a great idea and we're going to do it. And I attribute that 100% to our youth at the time. We were very, very young. I think you kind of need that to say, this is a great idea and no one's going to tell me differently.
I love that. And I resonate with that too. Sometimes you need to have a little bit of that naivete to take the risk that otherwise you might know too much and
Correct.
Not take the risk and do it. So you said it didn't even occur to you at first that bookstore owner was a possible career path. Did you have another career path in mind before that conversation?
Yes. I mean, depending on how far back we want to go, like childhood career path was I wanted to be in the circus. It's my dream to be in Cirque du Soleil, do acrobatics and trapeze, and I don't know, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I went through puberty and I lost all my flexibility. So that was no longer a possibility. It wasn't ever a realistic possibility, but then my more actual planned career path was I wanted to be a production designer for film and television. Then I worked on a film set and I said, wow, this is horrible. Anybody who does that, it's great. It's really boring. Spending days and days and days on it. I worked on a television set for a year. And I was like, I do not want to do this for the rest of my life. And so that I discarded that dream by the time I was like 20.
When you said, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, did you think entrepreneurship is the next step from there?
Yes. I wouldn't have said it as entrepreneurship. I would have said it as I don't want to work for somebody else.
When you had this realization, I want to be in charge, what was your next step to figure out what you should be in charge of?
That is the real sort of light bulby type moment. The conversation that Bea and I had, obviously there was a little bit more dialogue, but it pretty much was, we want to work together and start our own business. We think it would be fun to have a store. We think being shopkeepers would sort of be like we were in Gilmore Girls, which is our favorite television show. It's nothing like that. Okay, what are we selling at our store? Well, we love books, so we're selling books. Okay, the books we read are romance novels, so we have to sell romance novels. What if we only sold romance novels? End of conversation. There was like a little bit more, but not that much. And at that point, this was in 2015, we were like, oh, well, somebody's already doing this. We just don't know about it. And so then we're like Googling romance bookstores in the US. Turns out, no, nobody is doing it. And we just thought that was an incredible missed opportunity. I mean, Bea really from a romance advocate perspective and me more from a financial perspective. I've always been more of the numbers one. And I was just like, I go into a bookstore ready to give someone my money. And when they don't want it, I'm like, I don't understand this business model.
That's really, really interesting. I like what you said there as a business opportunity framework. Wherever you can find someone who has money in their hand that somebody else won't take, you want to show up and be the one who could deliver the service and take it. I love that framing.
Absolutely. I mean, understanding the economic buying power of the romance community, which has increased tenfold since we started. But even then, we were just like, why aren't people catering to these people who are ready and excited to spend their money if only somebody would respect them and treat them well?
What an insight. And I'm always fascinated by this moment where something goes from an idea to action. So tell me about that moment when you said, this is not just a brainstorm in the car with my sister, we're doing this.
I think our Kickstarter was like the proofing ground, basically. It was always, if it doesn't work, well, plan B. And by the way, we had no plan B. We would have figured it out. I don't know what it would have been. But I think putting that in motion meant there was no way to back out. People had given us money, so we better do the thing. That whole process, I fully attribute to just youth and naivete. We were just like, if we do it, people will help us, which did turn out to be true.
One of the other entrepreneurs I talked to called it his burn all the bridges moment when he said, I'm all in. I quit my job. I did everything. This is it. Did you have a moment like that, or are you still kind of playing multiple opportunities until you got more clarity?
I was graduating college and I took a semester off. So I was graduating in the middle of the year. And Bea was finishing her master's program at NYU. So we had a conversation, which was basically who's going to move, because she lived in New York and I lived in LA. I won that particular discussion. So she moved to LA and we were like, we're not getting jobs. Like, this is, the educational opportunity ends and this is our job now. And please, for anybody listening, I never want to hide or make any bones about my college education was paid for not by me. I did not graduate with debt. That's a huge part of this. So because of that, I was able to graduate in December, not get a job, and do this full time, and we opened in March.
The other thing that I hear so often, which I hear you saying as well, is right idea at the right time. And the timing for you is perfect. And I hear that again and again in entrepreneur stories. If I had this idea 5 years earlier or 5 years later, it wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't have done it.
I could not agree with that more. I mean, truly, yeah. Absolutely.
And then the other thing, it's not only right time, but it's right co-founder, right team. And you and your sister were a unit from the very beginning on this journey. It sounded like when you first started brainstorming, it was first, we want to do something together. Now, what do we do? Why that? Why was that your thought process?
Honestly, we missed each other. We actually like each other. And we hadn't been living together at that point since Bea went to college. It really did start with, we want to live in the same place and we want to do something together.
You said you thought it was going to be like you're in the Gilmore Girls, and it's not. So in what way is it not, for those of us who have Rory and gazebos in our heads, of what this is?
Oh, actually, Schitt's Creek is a better comparison. At one point, Dan Levy opens a store. All they ever do when they show the store is they're putting price tags on things. And I'm always like, why is that the only thing they ever do? And then also sometimes I'll spend 6 hours putting price tags on things. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess they were right. But yeah, when we opened the store, because I wanted to be a production designer, I really envisioned myself as the architect of the space and the visual input that people were getting. 10 years later, my main job is as a manager of other people. We have 26 employees. In the Stars Hall of Fantasy, you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about financials and math and like legal licenses and stuff like that. Turns out that's a really big part of the job.
It sounds like one big difference is that you envisioned that you wouldn't have employees when you started, and now you have 26 employees. Do you remember when you made the decision, oh my gosh, we need to hire our first employee?
Our first employee was not a bookseller. They weren't technically an employee. The first time we ever spent money to pay someone for their services, it was for a bookkeeper. And I was like, I've made it. Thank God. We can now afford to pay somebody else to do this. And honestly, I chose that over having a bookseller because when we were open in LA, if the store was open, either Bea or I or both of us were working as booksellers, doing everything else but mainly interacting with customers. And, at some point, maybe 2 years in, maybe a little more than that, was like, okay, we can hire someone. And I was like, we're getting a bookkeeper. I can't do this anymore. I'm so bad at this. And then it was very gradual. We hired, I think we hired literally one part-time person and, had that for a little while, hired another person. We were really ramping up our hiring. And I think we'd hired like 3 new people in January of 2020. And then something bad happened. So, you know what they never had to deal with in Stars Hollow? A global pandemic.
I wonder what they would have done.
I know. Honestly, because it's so small, they probably could have figured it out. Like, that really derailed our plans for like 3 years.
I want to go back actually to something you said. You said, when I hired the bookkeeper, wow, I really feel like I had made it. What is that moment when you went from feeling like, oh my gosh, is this going to work to, oh, this is working?
It was when the store bought its own health insurance plan. I never would have thought that. And there are other things that I could say in terms of like when we were in the New York Times and when, this really famous author came to the store. No, those are lies. It's literally when bought a health insurance plan that we then started offering to our full-time employees.
So you've had a lot of milestones, a lot of change. You're almost a decade journey now. What is the thing that you think would surprise you most if you were looking back 10 years ago of what you are today versus what you envisioned? What's the biggest difference?
The main thing that would surprise me is, again, the number of employees that we have. Because I just was not thinking that far in the future. So, we went from 0 employees to 26 employees. So that's sort of one piece of it. And then the other piece, I think, is being able to see milestones in our customers' lives and sometimes in like really stark and obvious ways. For example, this lovely woman who came in when we were opening and she was pregnant, that child is 10 years old. We've been invited to customers' weddings. I've seen people decide to become a romance author, write an entire book, become published. I don't think I really thought about what it would be like to be essentially a background character in lots of people's lives. And it's very cool.
And you've become such an important fixture in so many people's lives, but also in the industry itself. I mean, I loved when I went into your store to see the quotes from books where you are mentioned, where the Ripped Bodice is mentioned in romance. You are your store is the character too.
That should have been my answer to the what did you not expect thing, because that is so cool. I mean, now I guess everything becomes routine, but the first time that happened, I was like, what? So yes, if you mention us by name in your book, we have a wall, we'll put the cover of the book and the page where it says The Ripped Bodice.
You talked a lot about the naysayers that you had along your journey, and you are not the only ones. Most entrepreneurs, I would venture to say all entrepreneurs who are onto something big have a lot of naysayers. How did you handle them, and any techniques that kind of worked for you that you might pass on?
I think there were different kinds. You had one camp of, you can't possibly make money on this. Why are you limiting yourself in this way? Why wouldn't you open a general purpose bookstore? Why are you opening a brick and mortar bookstore? They're dying. And honestly, I'm going to way overgeneralize. That's the men's camp. That honestly was great at dealing with because I don't care. The thing we had trouble dealing with was criticism from the romance community, which felt very personal and very painful and much more rooted in emotions than practicalities. It sounds honestly a little ridiculous to say it now, but people, when we announced the name of the store, there was a group of people that hated it and hated it so loudly on the internet that we honestly were like, oh my God, what have we done? And it was so overwhelming, and now it's so minor. I guess my advice would be reduce the amount of people's opinions that you are taking in.
Go back to the other type of criticism, the you're too niche. Were you right on? Should you have gone narrow?
Our entire success is due to the fact that we have expertise in one thing. General appeal holds no interest for me. If I'm going to do something, I want to be really good at it. I will never be really good at trying to recommend all genres of books to people. I don't understand how people do that. Huge props to booksellers all over the world. That's their whole job. I don't know anything about nonfiction. I don't know anything about poetry. I don't know anything about business books. So to me, initially, what we were selling, I mean, still, is expertise. And I think because we felt like romance readers were so underappreciated, disrespected, and is there a word for like not monetarily catered to? I don't know. That question and that criticism from people just made no sense to me.
You overcame the naysayers. Some were easier to ignore, some were harder to ignore. I want to fast forward now. What is next? You're 2 stores in. You are the romance whisperers. What's next?
I grew up in the like girl boss, girl power era. There was such a sense of you can never be satisfied with what you have. You have to keep breaking glass ceilings and pushing. And at some point I was like, actually, for a while I was happy with one store, and then I was like, okay, I'm kind of bored now. I'm going to open another store. And then that was really hard and I was really tired, and it was like, okay, this feels great for right now. I wish people talked more about almost maintaining, it's a lot of work to, maintain where you're at and stay profitable and stay relevant. And yes, at some point I will probably do some other things, whether that's another physical store or, we have a lot of film and TV projects in the work. Those I can't really talk about. I put it this way. There are other ways to expand other than continuing to build physical stores. I'm always thinking about that, but I think it's a balance between enjoying the present and thinking about the future.
I love that. And what I love is I can hear the confidence that comes from experience in what you're saying. I'll know it when I see it because I've seen it before. I can recognize patterns. And that's a stripe that you earn. This has been incredible. I want to give you the lightning round question that I end all of my interviews with, which is, I was so excited to talk to you because you are an example of an entrepreneur that I look at and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that is a thing. And I mean that with the greatest affection and admiration possible. So I am curious, who is that entrepreneur for you that makes you say that?
Last month, my sister and I went on an amazing trip to Europe just before the holidays. And she's the person who found this, so she gets all the credit. I have a dog. I'll show you a picture of him. That's Sherman. And he is half dachshund, half other stuff. And when we were planning for our trip, we were going to Germany, and Bea texted me and said, there's a dachshund museum in Germany. So I would like to recommend the Dackel Museum in Regensburg, Germany. That's dachshund in German. It is an entire museum and mostly store devoted to dachshunds.
That was Leah Koch, co-founder of the Ripped Bodice bookstore. Check out the show notes for links to their stores and events, and yes, a link to Leah's favorite Dachshund museum in Germany. I'll see you next week.